excites them.
Right.
He pets them, he caresses them, and then when he gets ready, he brings them all to a climax at the same time.
Was Jackie Wilson's death more tragic than people knew? He was a music legend with a voice that touched millions, but his final years were heartbreaking. For years, there were rumors about how he was treated before he died.
If you look at the back of the records, you start seeing other names, you know, the names of some of the publishers' names, some of the record producers' names who did write those songs.
Did his family finally reveal the truth? What really happened to him in his last moments? Now, 41 years later, his family has confirmed some awful things.
Jackie Wilson had it all, from dance moves, the good looks, the fashion style. He could sing 4 octaves.
Jackie Wilson was not just a singer. He was an experience. When people listened to his music, they felt something special.
Jazz, pop. Listen, he had 4-octave range.
Yeah.
Okay,
which is really
tenor.
remarkable. Right?
Remarkable that he could be an opera singer. You listen what he...
But to truly understand why he was so famous, you had to see him perform. He got the nickname Mr. Excitement for 3 big reasons. First, his dance moves were full of energy, and he moved like nobody else on stage. Second, his voice was filled with passion, making every song sound deep and powerful. Third, he had a style that made him stand out. He always dressed sharp and knew how to get the audience's attention. Because of his incredible performances, many artists looked up to him. James Brown, known as the Godfather of Soul, was one of them. Even Michael Jackson was inspired by Wilson's stage presence. Wilson was one of the first to mix great singing with amazing dancing, and he set the stage for future entertainers. He was the kind of performer who made people scream, dance, and sometimes even faint from excitement.
I could actually hear the way that, well, I felt it was a church type thing. And this took it and threw it away, and I picked it back up.
One of the biggest moments in his career was when a very famous musician took notice of him. That man was none other than Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Elvis saw Wilson perform and was so impressed that he wanted to meet him. The two became friends, and their fans often compared them. Some people called Jackie Wilson the Black Elvis because of his wild dance moves and incredible voice. But Elvis had a funny response to this. He said, "If Jackie Wilson is the Black Elvis, then I must be the White Jackie Wilson." They had a lot in common, not just their talent, but also the controversy that often surrounded them. Jackie Wilson was not afraid to put on a show that shocked people. Like Elvis, he used a lot of hip movements while dancing, which many older people thought was inappropriate. But Wilson took it even further. He didn't just dance with energy, he also started taking off his clothes while performing. He would remove his jacket and tie, pretending he was getting too hot under the stage lights. By the end of his performance, his sweaty chest would be on full display, making the audience go wild. Parents of teenage girls were horrified, but Wilson didn't care. He loved the reaction he got from the crowd. But that wasn't the only thing people found shocking about his performances. Wilson had a way of using the microphone stand in a way that some found too suggestive. He would hold it close and move it in ways that made some people uncomfortable. There were even rumors that he pretended to unzip his pants as part of the show. Because of this, some of his concerts were given warnings, telling people they were only for mature audiences. But while some were offended, most of his fans loved every minute of it. They couldn't get enough of Mr. Excitement.
He works an audience just like a man meets a girl. He's in love, he's fascinated by this chick. He's working 10, 15,000 people the same manner.
Another part of Wilson's show that fans looked forward to was when he pulled audience members onto the stage. He made it a habit to pick women from the crowd and kiss them, sending fans into a frenzy. But people started noticing something strange about the women he chose. He never picked the most beautiful women in the audience. Some people thought he was being kind, giving a special moment to women who didn't usually get attention. But the truth was much more selfish. Wilson later admitted that he picked what he called the ugly girls on purpose. He believed that if an unattractive woman could kiss him, then any woman in the audience would feel like she had a chance. This was his way of making himself seem more desirable, making fans dream that one day they could get their turn to kiss him. It was all part of his image, and it worked. His concerts were always full, and women were always hoping to be the lucky one chosen that night.
Excites them.
Right.
He pets them, he caresses them, and then when he get ready, he brings them all to a climax at the same time.
But sometimes things at his concerts got out of control. In 1960, during a show in New Orleans, the crowd got so excited that some fans tried to rush the stage. They were so overwhelmed by Wilson's performance that they couldn't just watch anymore. They wanted to be part of it. It became a chaotic scene with people pushing and shoving, trying to get closer to their idol. Luckily, police officers were there to control the situation and stop things from getting out of hand. Most artists would be scared in a situation like this, but not Jackie Wilson. Instead of stepping back and letting security handle it, he got involved. He actually grabbed one of the officers who was trying to stop the fans. Some say it was just part of the excitement, but the law didn't see it that way. Wilson was later charged with assaulting a police officer. This could have been a big problem for his career, but Wilson had a way of bouncing back from trouble. No matter what happened, his fans always stood by him. He had a natural charm and talent that made people forgive him, no matter what he did.
As coming up, we really didn't realize how famous he was.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
You didn't know
No,
as
it
a
wasn't.
kid.
It wasn't like he's just famous entertainer.
Behind all his success, his life was full of troubles, heartbreaks, and shocking events. One of the scariest moments in his life happened when he got shot, and the real story behind it was different from what the public was told. One night, Jackie was with a woman named Juanita Jones. She was angry because she found out Jackie was seeing another woman. In a fit of rage, she pulled out a gun. Jackie's manager, Nat Tarnopol, didn't want people to know the truth. So he made up a fake story. He told the press that Jackie was trying to save a crazed fan who was about to shoot herself. The truth was, Juanita was no random fan. She was Jackie's lover. When she pulled the trigger, 2 bullets hit Jackie in the stomach. He fell to the ground, bleeding badly. Jackie was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. The doctors had to act fast to save his life. He needed emergency surgery right away. Thankfully, they were able to stop the bleeding and save him. But the shooting left him with 2 painful reminders. One of his kidneys had to be removed, and a bullet was still stuck in his spine. He survived, but he would carry the pain for the rest of his life.
How does a rock star who makes so much money lose it all? If you're too young to remember American Bandstand in its heyday, you may not know Jackie Wilson. He was one of rock and roll's first big names, stars who were the envy of their generation, not only having the time of their lives, but making fortunes along the way.
Even though Jackie lived through the shooting, his troubles were far from over. He was a famous singer, but he didn't have control over his own money. His manager, Nat Tarnopol, was in charge of his finances, but instead of taking care of Jackie's money, he was stealing from him. Jackie was making a lot of money, more than $260,000 a year when most people made only about $5,000, but somehow he ended up broke. One day Jackie got a visit from the IRS. They told him he owed $300,000 in unpaid taxes. Jackie was shocked. He had no idea he was in trouble with the government. He thought Tarnopol was handling everything, but the truth was, his manager had not been paying his taxes at all. Now the government wanted their money, and they were going to take anything valuable that Jackie owned.
You might think that an artist of Jackie Wilson's stature and talent, who sold millions of hit records, could have enjoyed the financial independence and security that some other rock stars were able to build. But this is a story of how Jackie Wilson died riddled with debts, without even a headstone for his grave.
The IRS went after Jackie's house in Detroit, where his wife and children lived. They took it away, leaving his family without a home. On top of that, Jackie had to set up a payment plan to pay off his huge debt.
He didn't know how deep in the hole he was getting, further and further in the hole to them, and the books were never honest anyway.
I became very much aware of his plight, as a lot of the other singers had the same situation.
His personal life was also falling apart. His wife, Frida Hood, had been with him through all his troubles, but she had finally had enough. She was tired of his cheating, money problems, and all the drama. She left him, taking their children with her.
There were lots of double dealing, double contracting, and just sheer ripping off of the act. You must understand, the acts in those days were teenagers going against corporate people.
Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Jackie got into more trouble. In 1964, he was performing at Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis. After the show, he found out the police were looking for him. He owed $2,200 because he didn't fulfill a contract for a performance. Jackie didn't want to get arrested, so he did something shocking. He ran to a window on the second floor and jumped out, but his escape plan didn't work. The police caught him later, and he spent the night in jail. Jackie couldn't seem to stay out of trouble. In 1967, while on tour in South Carolina, he and his drummer invited two young women to their hotel room. Not long after, the police burst in and arrested them. Why? The likely reason was that the women were white, and in those days that could cause problems, especially in the South. Jackie's reputation was already bad, and this incident made things even worse. Jackie's manager, Tarnopol, came up with a plan to fix Jackie's image. He thought it would be a good idea for Jackie to marry his girlfriend, Harleanne Harris. She was the woman he had been dating when Juanita shot him. Jackie and Harleanne had already had a child together, even while Jackie was still married to his first wife. So in 1967, they got married. But just like everything else in Jackie's life, the marriage didn't last. By 1969, they were divorced. If Jackie thought the 1970s would bring better days, he was wrong. The new decade started with a horrible tragedy. One day, his son, Jackie Jr., was outside on a friend's porch in Detroit. He got into an argument with a neighbor, and suddenly, a gun went off. Jackie Jr. was shot in the chest and fell to the ground. Sadly, he did not survive. When Jackie heard the news, he was devastated. He went into a deep depression and locked himself in his home. He didn't want to see anyone or talk to anyone. The pain of losing his son was too much for Jackie. He tried to numb his sadness with alcohol and drugs, but that only made things worse. Then more tragedy struck. One of his daughters had a heart attack and died. Not long after, another daughter got caught in a dangerous situation and was shot during a drug deal gone wrong. Jackie was completely broken. It seemed like his family was cursed. Jackie Wilson had a powerful voice and was famous for hit songs like Lonely Teardrops and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me higher and higher. His music brought joy to many people, but his personal life was filled with sadness and tragedy. He faced many hardships, including being shot, suffering a major health crisis, and losing 3 of his children at young ages. In 1961, Jackie Wilson was shot by a female fan. She was obsessed with him, and when he refused her advances, she pulled out a gun and shot him. The bullet damaged his kidney and stayed near his spine for the rest of his life. He survived but had health problems because of the shooting. Despite this, he continued performing and making music for years. One of the worst tragedies in Jackie Wilson's life was the death of his son, Jackie Jr. In 1970, Jackie Jr. was only 16 years old when he was shot and killed. He had an argument with a neighbor and things got out of control. The neighbor pulled out a gun and shot him right on the porch. Losing his son was devastating for Jackie Wilson. He was heartbroken and never fully recovered from the pain. After his son's death, Jackie Wilson started drinking heavily and using drugs. Many people believed he was trying to numb his pain. He was struggling, but he still kept performing. Then, in 1975, another tragedy struck. While singing on stage, he suddenly collapsed from a heart attack. He fell into a coma and suffered major brain damage. He never fully recovered and spent the next 9 years in hospitals and nursing homes until he passed away in 1984.
Good evening. A long line of mourners said goodbye to Detroit's Jackie Wilson today. They gathered in the church where he had started out. Mr. Excitement.
As if losing his son wasn't enough, Jackie Wilson also lost 2 daughters in heartbreaking ways. His daughter, Sandra, died in 1977 at just 24 years old. She suffered a sudden heart attack which shocked everyone. She was still young and had so much life ahead of her, but her life was cut short. This added even more pain to Jackie Wilson's already broken heart. Another one of Jackie Wilson's daughters, Jacqueline, was also taken in a tragic way. In 1988, she was 37 years old when she was shot in the back while standing outside a store in Highland Park, Michigan. The area was known for drug activity, and police believed her death might have been connected to that. Her murder was another devastating loss for the Wilson family.
At the back of the records, you start seeing other names, you know, the names of some of the publishers' names, some of the record producers' names who didn't write those songs.
The audience at the Latin Casino was excited. They were watching Jackie Wilson perform on stage. So when he slowly collapsed to the stage, the audience thought it was part of his act. They clapped and cheered, thinking he was just being dramatic, but something was wrong. Backstage, Dick Clark saw what was really happening. He noticed that Wilson wasn't moving. His body was limp and he looked like he was in trouble. Clark didn't hesitate. He rushed to stop the concert. He knew that this wasn't part of the show. Something was very wrong. At that moment, backup singer Cornell Gunner ran to Wilson's side. He got down on his knees and tried to help him. Gunner spoke to Wilson, hoping for a response, but Wilson didn't answer. He shook him gently, but still, there was nothing. The crowd started to realize something was off. The cheers died down and the room became quiet. The atmosphere changed from excitement to worry. Someone called for an ambulance and paramedics rushed to the scene. The big question now was, would they get there in time? When the paramedics arrived, they took over from Gunner. They checked Wilson's pulse and breathing. His heartbeat was weak, but he was still alive. They quickly put him on a stretcher and rushed him to the hospital. The doctors worked fast. They thought he had suffered a heart attack or maybe a stroke. At first, it seemed like they had saved him. His vital signs stabilized, and people started to hope that he would recover. But then, something terrible happened. Wilson slipped into a coma. His body shut down and he stopped responding. Doctors were puzzled. They weren't sure why he had gone into a coma. They did some tests and started asking people who had been on stage what they saw. That's when they discovered something important. Yes, Wilson had suffered some kind of attack on stage, but there was more to the story. As he collapsed, his head had hit a heavy piece of equipment. The impact was serious. His brain had been injured. This made his condition even worse. The chances of him waking up became very slim. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Wilson remained in a coma. His loved ones didn't give up. They visited him, talked to him, and prayed. They hoped that one day he would wake up. Then in 1976, something amazing happened. Wilson started showing small signs of life. He was moving slightly. He even managed to stand up and take a few shaky steps. It seemed like a miracle. His friends and family were overjoyed, but their happiness didn't last long. Wilson soon slipped back into his coma. This time, the doctors called it a semi-coma. He wasn't fully unconscious, but he also wasn't awake. His body was stuck in a terrible state. Meanwhile, another problem was growing. Before his collapse, Wilson had been planning to sue his ex-manager for $1 million. But with Wilson in a coma, the lawsuit was put on hold. That meant no money was coming in. Wilson's hospital bills were piling up fast. Wilson had already faced financial struggles before, and now things were getting worse. He couldn't work and he couldn't fight for his money. Without help, he was facing bankruptcy again. That's when the music community stepped in. His friend, musician Bobby Womack, couldn't stand to see Wilson suffer. He decided to take action.
He was good friends with Sam Cooke.
Right.
Then there was Ray Charles, and there was James Brown, you know, so they were all there together. And
On March 4th, 1976, Womack organized a benefit concert at the Hollywood Palladium. Many musicians performed, and all the money raised went toward Wilson's hospital bills. It was a huge help, but sadly, money couldn't fix everything. Wilson's health kept getting worse. Doctors had to move Wilson to a hospital in Mount Holly, New Jersey. His body was getting weaker and he couldn't eat. Soon he caught pneumonia, a dangerous lung infection. His body couldn't fight it. In 1984, after spending years in a coma, Jackie Wilson passed away. He was only 49 years old.
And what we're doing is as natural as being born. We cannot glorify
say goodbye.
But even after his death, his troubles weren't over. Wilson had no money left, and his family couldn't afford a proper burial. He was buried in an unmarked grave with no headstone. It was heartbreaking. A man who had once been a superstar was now resting in a forgotten grave. Once again, the music community came together. This time, it was led by a well-known disc jockey named Jack the Rapper Gibson. He started raising money to give Wilson a proper resting place. Thanks to the kindness of fellow musicians and fans, Wilson was moved to a mausoleum in a cemetery in Wayne, Michigan. After he passed away, his songs continued to be popular. Many famous artists have paid tribute to him over the years. One of the first big tributes came from Van Morrison. In 1972, he recorded a song called Jackie Wilson Said, I'm in Heaven When You Smile, on his album St. Dominic's Preview. Later, in 1982, a band called Dex's Midnight Runners made their own version of the song. This showed how much Wilson's music inspired other musicians. After Wilson passed away, Michael Jackson gave him a special tribute at the 1984 Grammy Awards. When Jackson won the Grammy for Thriller, he dedicated the award to Wilson. Jackson called Wilson a great entertainer and a pioneer. He said that some people follow trends, but others make their own path, and Wilson was one of those leaders. Jackson ended by saying, Jackie, where you are, I'd like to say, I love you, and thank you so much. This was a touching moment that showed how much Wilson influenced younger artists. In 1985, the Commodores recorded a song called Night Shift. This song was made in memory of Wilson and another famous singer, Marvin Gaye. Both Wilson and Gaye had passed away in 1984, and the song was a way to remember their impact on music. Night Shift became a big hit and reminded people of Wilson's incredible talent. Even after his death, Wilson's music continued to be popular. In 1986, his song Reet Petite became a huge hit in Europe. It reached #1 in the Netherlands, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. This success was helped by a new animated music video made with a clay model of Wilson. The video became popular on British television and helped introduce his music to a new generation. In 1987, Wilson had more hits in the UK with I Get the Sweetest Feeling and Your Love Keeps Lifting Me, Higher and Higher. Many other artists have also honored Wilson in different ways. In 1994, Peter Tork from the Monkees recorded a new version of Higher and Higher. He had first released it in 1981, and it became his most famous solo song. He continued to perform it in concerts for many years. In 2010, a special TV program called Say It Loud, a celebration of black music in America, featured tributes to Wilson. Smokey Robinson and Bobby Womack both spoke about his talent. Smokey said Wilson was the most exciting singer and performer he had ever seen. Bobby Womack said that in his opinion, Wilson was the real Elvis Presley, and even Elvis learned from him.